The Hogsty presents It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and Rich Rogers. And now, here's your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogsty Network, a show where we look at the dollars and the cents of the sports industrial complex. I'm joined by my regular co-hosts, Rich and Steve. Rich, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, recovering, man, from leftovers and everything. Got a refrigerator full of food, but doing well. Blessed. Thanks.
Steve, how you holding up?
I'm still recovering from a tryptophan-induced haze, but I'm told that goes away in a day or two, so I am doing okay.
Awesome. Yes, same here on all of those fronts, and a happy and Merry Thanksgiving weekend, or I hope that you had one, because you'll probably be listening to this way after. So I hope everyone had a happy and healthy holiday as the kickoff to this holiday season. We are going to talk about three topics today, some new topics and some revisits. First off, we're going to jump into a little hot stove baseball. And no, we're not going to talk about the comings and goings of different players, but we are going to look at some of the business and management stories that are sort of taking center stage during baseball's hot stove season. And there's two that are kind of a little bit related, but interesting nonetheless. Steve, you want to give us a quick primer on these baseball stories?
Sure. Okay, the first and most interesting one to me, at least, is that there's a big fight going on right now between Major League Baseball, the Major League Baseball Players Association, and then the Japanese Baseball League, which goes by NBP. Now, the genesis of the fight goes back years and years and years, in that when there is a Major League Baseball quality Japanese player who's under contract with the Japanese baseball team, the Japanese team can do what's called posting the player. And then once the player is posted, then under various procedures, Major League Baseball teams can bid on these players. Now, for guys like Yu Darvish, things got way, way, way out of control. And, you know, you're talking about tens of millions of dollars in bidding fees. And, you know, a good chunk of that money goes to the Japanese team, which is why they do it. And so a couple years ago, Major League Baseball wanted to limit the amount of money they were having to pay in posting fees. And so they changed the system around to where, the posting fee was limited to $20 million, which didn't make them happy. But now what's going on right here and now is that the Players Association has started to complain about this Japanese posting system because the Japanese teams can post these players all year long. There's no deadline as it sits right now, and the problem with that, according to the Players Association, is that is messing up free agency for players that are already in Major League Baseball. Because if right now, for example, there's a real big time prospect in Japan whose name I'm going to butcher, but his last name is Otani. He's a ace-level pitcher and a hitter, and so, teams are all gaga over him. But the problem is if there's no date that limits the posting deadline, teams they're going to have their salary budget all tied up waiting for Otani, which hurts the Players Association. So what is going on right now as we speak, and right now there is a Monday deadline, meaning 2 days before you're going to hear this, that could be moved back, though, depending on how it goes. But there's a Monday deadline to reach a new agreement wherein there's going to be a deadline every year of November 15th and some new procedures for posting these players. So stay tuned, because this Otani guy is, again, maybe the first player ever in history who is legitimately talented enough to be a two-way player. But that is what is going on with the posting system. Let's get comments on that before I move on to the next one.
Well, I think, that's interesting. And there are a couple of MLB players that have been in a very similar situation, but I'm curious as to how MLB would actually award a player like that to a particular team. I mean, in the NFL they have it where if teams have to put in waiver claims, and teams with the worst record have a better chance of getting awarded the player. I don't know if MLB has a system like that. What do you guys think?
What's interesting here is you bring up a good point because it used to be that this posting system was public and open, and that was when teams. That's why the Yankees got who's the ace with the Yankees? Help me, Tanaka. Yeah. Now, what the last update of this posting system is it's supposed to be a blind. This update is supposed to be a blind posting system, meaning, and there's an upper limit of 20 million, which means that the Yankees, the Cubs, the Dodgers, and a couple other teams aren't just going to outbid everybody because A, it's blind, and B, there's a limit. And so that completely changes the way that teams look at this, because a guy like Ohtani isn't necessarily going to end up with the three or four big money teams. He could end up with anybody in this case. So it's fundamentally changes this system, and it's fundamentally unlike the Major League Baseball free agency system, which clearly isn't a blind bidding system.
Right. Yeah.
It's also unlike the other ways in which Major League Baseball imports international players. So it's also interesting in that it's just a special relationship or contractual agreement with the Japanese Baseball League. It's much different about how Major League teams go and recruit, sign, etc., players from Latin America or even Korea or other places. So it is a very specialized system within the ecosystem of international talent. And the other thing I find interesting that the Players Association is a little bit perturbed at is that in the end, a player like Ohtani or the other ones they'll get relatively modest signing bonuses and salary when they come over, but the team back home, in this case, I love Japanese baseball names, Nippon Ham Fighters, will receive up to $20 million, as you said, Steve. So there's also the Players Association is also looking at this like, how does all this money change hands, and the players are actually, the player is actually not going to receive, sort of what they would say would be equity or an equitable fiscal transaction in the process. So they're fighting it they're perturbed and fighting it on a few levels.
Yeah, no, that's true, and that's the upper limit of these salaries is the effect of the latest updates to the posting system agreement, because it didn't used to be like that. Like you, Darvish had a huge salary right up front, and the way they've kind of changed this does limit this. And yeah, it's true that Ohtani honestly could probably make more with his Japanese team than he could with his American team. So it's a case of these guys just wanting to come over and play in the best baseball league. And when I say the best baseball league, this isn't just like me, Mr. Conservative Pro-America. I mean, Major League Baseball is a huge step up talent-wise from both the Korean League and the Japanese League. And so there's something to be said for a guy like Ohtani wanting to come over and play kind of in the big boy, with the big boys. And that's what it's really about for a guy like him. And it's about his second contract, which could be huge if he plays well.
The thing that's sort of sad is that if this doesn't get figured out over the next couple of days or delayed so they have more time to figure it out, is this Ohtani would probably then not be able to even make his Major League Baseball debut until after this coming season. And, as a fan and a fan of baseball in general and a fan of really just interesting sports stories, the idea that this guy could come over in here and do something like what he's done in Japanese baseball, which is essentially win 10 games and hit, I think, something like 10 or 15 homers in a couple of consecutive seasons. I mean, that's something that I think I want to see. So this is one of those things where there's kind of like the kind of arcane business arrangements here, could potentially block what would be kind of almost, like you said, a first-in-a-generation player or ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, and I'd love to see it too. I have my doubts about whether any team's going to let him play every day, but that's another story, I suppose. He strikes me as more of an American League thing, if anything. If he's going to, I just can't imagine they're going to let a starting pitcher play outfield. I'd love to see it. I want to see it. I'm rooting for it, but
yeah, but he could DH and pitch, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he could DH, which bums me out as a Dodger fan because I know he's not getting in that with the Dodgers, but that's life.
Yeah, I'm actually interested in. It's fascinating. If they had a situation where teams had a chance to own the rights to some of these players in the Japanese league, and that would be sort of an interesting business discussion as well.
And isn't it that the Japanese league basically wants to? They have to basically protect their league, or else,
Right.
we
We poach all of their
right,
a lot of their
and which is a
players,
big
yeah.
deal in Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you see, we're not really poaching them. It's because they're being posted because these guys are under contract, and basically what happens is, from a legal perspective, the Japanese league will terminate the contract in exchange for payment under this posting system. So I wouldn't necessarily say that Major League Baseball is poaching their players because they're doing it out of greed. It's just flat out greed. I mean, they're posting it because they can make tens of millions of dollars. That's
Yeah.
that they are intentionally hurting their league in order to make money. you know,
Yeah.
Newsflash: billionaires want more money.
All right, so we're going to move on to our next hot stove topic, which is, kind of remarkable and maybe a bit of an unreported story in that the Braves former general manager, now former general manager, has been banned for life. Not something you hear often in, outside of maybe, repeated doping in international sports or even in U.S. pro sports. You don't hear banned for life very often in a sports context. So, Steve, you want to give us the quick primer on this story?
Yeah, there's a guy named John Coppolella who has joined the Pete Rose ranks of the band. And John Coppolella, forgive me if I'm butchering your name, but frankly, we're never going to hear from you again, so it doesn't matter. He was the general manager of the Atlanta Braves, and the Atlanta Braves have gotten in humongous, massive trouble in the way they have signed a bunch of international players. So this kind of dovetails into the Japanese thing, but these guys, the players that we're talking about, are Latin American. Because the system for signing Latin American players is totally different than Japan, because we're signing 16, 17-year-olds in Latin America, and there's no posting system. They just go down there and sign them. A couple years ago, baseball changed the system so that now there's a pool and a limit to how much money teams can sign, which again keeps the Dodgers and the Yankees from buying every talented player in Latin America. But essentially, without getting too much into the nuts and bolts of it, the basic gist of it is that the Braves paid these players way more than they were allowed to pay them. And so what has happened, this is unprecedented as far as I can remember. I don't know if you guys can remember something like this happening, but Major League Baseball has voided these contracts for 12 of these Latin American prospects that the Braves signed. 12 of them. The players got to keep their money, so that's good. But these guys can be re-signed by other Major League Baseball teams now because the Braves were so brazen in the way that they violated the international signing bonus pool money. So that it's unbelievable. And yeah, they banned this John Coppolella guy from from baseball. Which it's just mind blowing to me that something like this could actually happen.
Yeah, I mean that sounds unprecedented, and first of all, I don't know if the Braves are. The Braves, they still stink, so I don't see how this is beneficial for them in the short run. But banned for life is that's pretty serious, and this is something that bears watching.
We always beat up on, or at least I do, but we've had this as a topic in the past. The sort of the hot, the amount of money makes the corruption in the NCAA men's college football and basketball, which are essentially minor league talent pipelines for those pro sports. High degree of just badness and corruption. But it's really interesting in sports like hockey and baseball, where you have much more decentralized system, that the level of potentially smaller corruption and these kind of deals and the kind of Wild West nature of how you actually bring in talent into your farm leagues and into your franchises can be just as much different, but just as corrupt and crazy. And so it's sort of interesting about how hard and difficult be how corrupt and how much scheming goes on in getting talent into these pro sports leagues, regardless of the path.
Yeah, and people need to remember that these are kids we're talking about. This isn't a case of signing, Otani, who's a professional baseball player. The biggest prospect who's involved in this Braves thing is 17 years old.
Wow.
17, he's a kid named Maitan from Venezuela. And part of this was involved a kid they signed who was only 14 years old.
Yeah.
And you can't sign 14 years old. You can't even recruit 14 years old to college,
Right.
in the United States. And so it's really a specialized system that preys on the fact that there's absolutely no infrastructure whatsoever in Latin America. And so, that's perhaps a social question. Should Major League Baseball even be preying on kids like this that aren't even adults? The opposite end of that, of course, is that they're paying lots of money to families who have nothing. So you can kind of look at it both ways. But I'm not surprised that a team would bend the rules. And apparently, the Braves aren't the only team that do this. I'm just surprised at the punishment. Voiding contracts and banning people for life. It's just unbelievable when you're talking about basically what would amount to salary cap violations.
Yeah. I don't know. I just, it's amazing that anyone would be looking at a 14-year-old. I know they do it in basketball, but they'll be looking at a 14-year-old to play Major League Baseball. That's just mind-boggling.
Well, yeah,
having gone through the whole baseball thing, in America with Little League and select ball and everything else. Scouts look at these guys. 14's a little young, but they're being looked at. To me, the difference is that, in Latin America, we're actually signing them.
Yeah.
And this isn't like the University of Texas recruiting them. They're not recruiting these guys. It's only Major League Baseball that really has the resources to be able to put on like big, huge scouting operations in Latin America.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, in hockey and baseball, which essentially have there's obviously some differences, but basically the same farm league type system. You've got these futures contracts and, all kinds of corruption that goes on. And yeah, they're scouting them young and, networks of high school coaches and, select league, little league or hockey organizations. This is, the depth of this system, I think, is kind of mind-boggling. It's something we don't think about that often, and where you actually start to appreciate some of the NCAA rules on how this, how you get players into this pipeline.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing to me, and I think people would probably be disgusted about how this happens. What's going on is that these teams they'll sign, say, a 16-year-old, and they'll put him in like a Latin American league or Latin American baseball academy that the team runs. So these teams will have basically, what amounts to farm systems where they keep these kids in Venezuela until they become of age. At that point, then they'll bring them up to the Major League Baseball minor system. So, part of me is disgusted, and part of me says that they're helping these kids by giving their families a life, with money.
Yeah, who do they actually get to? And the thing is, do they actually get a chance to see that money?
Well, that's another question entirely. Who knows? God only knows what's happening in some of these third world countries, and they certainly see the money once they come to the United States in the minor leagues. But whether or not Dad and whoever else, down there is taking the money, when they sign a contract as a 15-year-old, who knows?
Yeah.
Well,
15 is too young, but as a 17-year-old.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll go ahead and move on. Some good hot stove there. We'll probably keep tracking these stories, especially and maybe if anyone out there in listener land knows of another team executive in any sport that's been banned for life, let us know. I've been racking my brain. I can't think of, obviously the Pete Roses and of the world and maybe a couple doping ones, but as an executive, even Steinbrenner's the one that pops to my head, but he got let back in.
Yeah.
So, Rich, you're going to introduce the next topic because you are a regular guest of FedEx Stadium and the experience there, and give us a little introduction into this topic around their field.
So I am a regular attendee. I'm not a season ticket holder, but I attend about 4 or 5 Redskins games every year at FedEx. And so I've always been taught to say something positive before you say something negative. So I am very excited that they have installed cup holders at FedEx Field in the stands. That is a very underrated luxury. Instead of having to hold my beverage when it's 40, 50 degrees out. But having said that, there's been a lot of talk about the field and the poor quality of the actual field, and a lot of Redskins, and surprisingly, Kirk Cousins came out very strongly a couple of days ago and threw some shade onto Redskins organization for the quality of the field. And of course, our local media loves to eat it up, and maybe Kirk doesn't want to be here because of the field. He doesn't like the field. So Kirk Cousins threw a pass the other night, and his left foot got caught in the turf. Didn't sustain an injury, but it was enough to generate some buzz. And so the field is not good quality. It is basically painted dirt. And it's been this topic of ridicule and criticism from not only current Redskins, but visiting players as well. What do you guys think?
Well, first of all, I knew it was going to go downhill when you introduced the cup holder concept as the positive. That nothing good is going to come when you start with saying, well, the good thing is we have a cup holder.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like you're buying a Toyota. Look, here's a cup holder. Well, okay. The field we know is an abomination. This is not the first year that has been dirt. I think it's perhaps the most prominent year that the dirt has come to life, because we had the national TV game, where it was so obvious that they were playing on painted dirt. The interesting thing to me here is the reason why Daniel Snyder refuses to fix this. The grounds crew knows how to grow grass, presumably, but it's not growing for whatever reason. I'm not a horticulturist. I don't know. What would fix the problem is just installing a turf system, and he refuses to do that. Now, I know some fans out there think it's about money. Maybe it is. I don't think so. I think this is just a case of Dan Snyder stubbornly sticking to the history of grass, playing services for the Washington Redskins. But the fact of the matter is, it's an embarrassment. It makes the Redskins look cheap. It's just another reason for the football public to complain about this organization, and it's frankly an easy fix. It's not an easy fix now in Week 12, but it's an easy fix in the offseason. Install a turf field, be done with it, and we never have a field issue again. So I can't figure out if it's just Dan Snyder being cheap or if it's Dan Snyder stubbornly sticking to tradition when he shouldn't.
Well, one of the things that
one interesting angle here is that
one of the things that was also talked about locally here on the radio was that the type of grass that they have is a very difficult grass to grow in this climate. So there's been a lot of talk about switching to a different. And you're right, Steve, it's not something that can be fixed now, but to switch to a different kind of grass, more of a rye type of grass. But the current grass that they have is very difficult to grow in this area.
I don't understand the fascination with grass. You'd think that I'm usually the one that stubbornly sticks to tradition and everything, but I don't understand why we're messing with it. It's not like this is carpet, like carpet on cement. I said this on the Hogside the other day. I mean, it's not like it's carpet on cement like it was in the old vet. Some of these turf fields are really, really quality. So why mess with trying to, find rye or whatever, grass grows in a winter climate? Why fiddle with it? Just put turf in and be done with it. I mean, Dan Snyder has a reputation, okay? he has a reputation when it comes to players of player acquisition of spending whatever it takes, but he has sort of the opposite reputation when it comes to internal business matters of the Redskins. And so I think the people who are out there who are wondering if it's just him being cheap, I think at least have raised a good point. Because Rich, you mentioned the practice bubble, how long it took. I think you mentioned that. I mean, there's no reason to not have a practice bubble except you just didn't want to pay for it. And I wonder if that's not part of it with this field. And I just don't understand why you'd bother trying to grow rye when it's in the wintertime. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting about what you bring up there around Snyder is that, I think, he sees spending money on players as investing in his team, but investing in your team being good and sustained, quality over many, many years and actually turning into a quality franchise are things like quality of the practice facilities, quality of the field itself, quality of the in-game experience. I mean, one thing that I was quality of who you let into your stadium. He was an innovator in the secondary market for team ticket sales. Well, look where that's gotten us. So we see ourselves see the team on, prime time Thanksgiving night. The stadium is two-thirds full. Rick Schneider said he put it at about 40,000 people there. It's half blue jerseys. The field looks, horrendous on the close-up and far-away shots on TV. The in-game experience is horrible. These things actually matter, and they do have impact on the play on the field, the reputation of the franchise, whether it's recruiting players, whether it's the surface field, tripping on whatever. These things matter, and so I think cheaping out on these things, which I think the reputation is probably well earned, do have an impact on the quality of your franchise within the league and the quality of the play on the field. And you can say he's backed off on a lot of things, and you're probably right in terms of micromanaging the franchise. But to me, this idea that he's willing to invest holistically in the right ways to make a quality franchise is a joke.
Yeah, I think you're right. And you said it perfectly. I'm not sure that Dan Snyder's changed at all when it comes to investing in the franchise. And I think it's a pretty big deal when you have your star quarterback, who's who's very savvy when it comes to the media, and he usually doesn't say anything controversial whatsoever. He just flat out told Grant and Danny, the field didn't look like a professional field. I think that's pretty big news, and it kind of went under the radar scope for some reason, a little bit. But, I think the franchise would be wise to listen and finally fix this once and for all. Do I have faith that they will do it? Absolutely not. I think they're going to do nothing but fiddle with the type of rye they're growing. And I think it'll be exactly the same, but they should do it for the reasons that you articulated. I don't think I can improve on what you said, Chris. I think you said it exactly right.
Well, I'd like to take a wait and see what they do in the off season. They have now. FedEx Field is a dump. It was a dump, and so I want to give Dan Snyder just a little bit of credit in that they did upgrade the jumbotron screens a few years ago. The one they had before was just like the
it's like a TV you had in your living room.
Yeah, it was like you put up a sheet and you just project it was horrible. So they do have now, and the quality of those jumbotrons are excellent. They did upgrade the food. They're trying to improve the game day experience. They have now. Actually, I think this is a good thing. They have They have two central locations at the stadium where they have all of these jumbotron screens, so you can watch like all of the games. So as you're walking through the concourse, you can watch all of the games. The stadium is just nowhere near the quality of other stadiums. I went to a game at Raven Stadium, and Raven Stadium is, I think, much better than FedEx. It's not, jaw dropping, but it's newer. And Snyder inherited this stadium, so. How much can you do other than tear it down and rebuild it? But as far as the field is concerned, yeah, they can do some different things. Let's see what they do in the off season. But the first thing, if you install turf, the first knee injury or ACL tear or whatever, then fans will come back and blame the turf and say we should have stuck with grass. So.
Yeah, you're right. But let me ask you, Rich, about the food, because I'm the wrong person to ask about food, because I'm a person of very simple taste, and if you get away from a hot dog, at a game, I'm just not interested. But you say the food has been upgraded. Now, has it been upgraded to the point where you are voluntarily spending more money on food because you can get better food? I mean, is there a profit? Is there an end result of profit as a result of the upgrades?
Well, I don't know what the profit margin is. I mean, it's hard to say because a lot of times people tailgate and they stuff themselves before they come in. But I just know that the lines are generally wrapped around the concourse at halftime because they have a lot of different selections. So, I used to tease, my wife and I used to joke, about the same old chicken fingers and French fries that they serve. That's worse than the chicken fingers that you can get from the grocery store. But they have some Asian selections and they have some healthier selections. So I do see that they have tried to improve the fan experience at the games. It's just that it's so much that you can do in the current edifice, in the current structure, outside of tearing the joint down.
I can, by the way, shed some light on how the food works in the NFL because I've been through this. My legal career, there's a company called Aramark, and Aramark used to supply all the food for all these stadiums. And basically the team will sign a deal with Aramark that says, we're going to provide this, and this. And, Aramark, I mean, God bless them, but it's not exactly, Wolfgang Puck, okay? I mean, they're in the mass food, lowest common denominator production quality when it comes to food. Now, the improvements come when, the FedEx Field will lease space to better quality restaurants. And so, like, the chicken fingers we're talking about are no doubt an Aramark thing. Wherein if they're leasing space to, like, say something better, which is what the line in the concourse for, that's how you improve the food quality, because Aramark is never going to give you any kind of great food. But that's how it works. Yeah.
I mean, so we all know the Redskins are going to get a new stadium at some point, and they're going to get a new field. To me, I kind of get the whole, I kind of get the criticism of the field. I just think, like, if the Redskins were like, 8-2, 9-1, nobody would give a damn about the field. What are we really talking about here?
I don't know if I agree with you for there. I mean, because the field looked terrible. I guess the overhead shot that was on the Thanksgiving Day game, it looked like a flag. There was green, and then there was brown, and then there was green. It looked like some weird third country, flag we've never heard of, with the logo right in the middle. Yeah, it really was. And I don't know if that's going to go away if the team is 9-2 or whatever. I think the field makes the franchise look bad from an NFL perspective, and it's just yet another thing that the Redskins aren't doing right.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think, Rich, if the team was 9-2, the local fan base wouldn't be harping on this, but that doesn't mean it's attracting players, image in the league. I think it would still be very damaging on those fronts. Yes, the local fan base would be talking about playoffs and whatnot. But I don't think that. But that doesn't necessarily mean people wouldn't be talking, nor would it be having a long-term negative effect on the franchise.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't hear about the Patriots, anybody complaining about the Patriots field because, what's his name, Bob Kraft has put a field in that works somehow, some way, and nobody talks about it, and they're in Boston, which is another level of winter bad than is D.C.
I'll tell you another field that doesn't look much better than ours is if you look at the Arizona Cardinals field. I mean, their field is not all that great either. I mean, I've seen a couple of things there. So, I mean, the field is bad, but
But there you go. So you just said, Snyder is about the same as the Bidwells.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, the Bidwell family has a reputation as being maybe the worst ownership group in football, and they were playing at a college stadium for a decade.
Yeah,
So it's that's perhaps not who Dan Snyder should hope to emulate. when it comes to stadium management.
So we'll transition from this story for our final story, which is more billionaire owner drama and gossip and intrigue. As a bit of an update on the story that we spent a lot of time after multiple weeks, but especially in our last show talking about, and that's this growing feud. Well, now I guess it's not growing; it's here. Feud between Jerry Jones, the NFL, and Roger Goodell, and probably increasingly Jerry Jones and at least a segment of the owners in and of itself. The big update here is that Jones has agreed now not to sue the NFL, so that's actually the biggest news bit headline since the last time we talked. So maybe that has meant the pressure valve has been released somewhat. But I think it is pretty clear from some good in-depth reporting and just what we sort of see with our own eyes that the acrimony between Jones and probably a small bit of owners around him, and the league office, and I don't think this is the last we'll hear. And Jones definitely likes to be an agent of chaos. So just because he decided not to sue doesn't mean he isn't have battles on multiple fronts. So that's a little bit of the update here. Rich, how have you been enjoying watching Jerry Jones versus the rest of the league?
I don't understand why Jerry Jones doesn't come under more scrutiny. He is, and quite honestly, he's a Hall of Famer. He's a Hall of Fame. We can't forget that he's in the Hall of Fame. But
boo.
I know. I'm enjoying everything that's going wrong with Dallas. From everything from their seemingly collapse without Zeke Elliott. I'm enjoying Jerry Jones whining, like I won't say the word, but whining like a little punk. And he is.
Thank you for keeping it clean from the SoundCloud iTunes censors.
Yes. So, here's the thing. I think Jerry Jones is, what I don't understand, I find fascinating is that there are not more owners that are coming out on his side as far as Goodell was concerned. Because you hear so much criticism and the public disdain for Roger Goodell that you would think that there would be more owners and this would be more of a more of a battle internally with the owners, but it's not, and it's just Jerry Jones pretty much going rogue. But I'm enjoying it. For all we talk about Dan Snyder, you'd actually could put Jerry Jones in that same category as of dysfunction.
Well, can I let you guys in on a little secret? You guys mind?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, please.
Jerry Jones was never going to sue the NFL. It was an empty threat. The owners knew it was an empty threat. The only thing that a lawsuit by number one, Jerry Jones had no case. There's no valid cause of action that Jerry Jones could dream up that would have given him any legal traction whatsoever. The NFL had operated by its bylaws in delegating the job of negotiating the contract to the players or to the compensation committee. Jones was whining and crying. I get it. He doesn't like it, and it probably still stems from the Elliott case, but he was never going to sue. It was going to if he sued, it would cause a huge, gigantic mess that would have dragged on for years. But at the end of the day, he had exactly zero hope of winning anything. So Jones is never going to sue. It's just him babbling. Now, what's interesting is that Rich, you said it. It's Jerry Jones going rogue, and Dan Snyder. He's one of the few that supported him. Those two guys have two of the three most valuable franchises in the NFL. So whatever they're doing is working from a monetary standpoint. Those two guys, particularly Jones, has figured out how to monetize local marketing deals in a way that has provided him income that most other teams don't have, and Daniel Snyder has followed suit. So they're making a whole lot more money, and I'd be willing to bet that doesn't make owners of some other teams particularly happy, and particularly when Jones is an unlikable loudmouth on top of that. So he's probably not the most popular guy in the world right now, but he was never going to sue. It's all garbage, and I expect that a deal is going to be done with Roger Goodell sooner rather than later, Jones's braying notwithstanding.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and we'll tweet out the link or somehow get it to the listeners. But there's a great long form journalism piece coming out in ESPN the magazine just that kind of chronicles Jones's complicated relationship with Goodell, with the league, up until just recent events. And it's just fascinating the level of he's like the god of chaos, right? He's like Loki or something, against Thor in terms of all the kind of dirty tricks and wheeling and dealings, which I figured the lawsuit would never, sort of come to the courts, nor would he have a chance to win. But threatening it, hiring David Boies, those are all parts of his chaos campaign, not really a legal one, in my opinion. So it's really fascinating to see, how much he's willing to kind of blow it up. I mean, really what this is his ultimate strategy probably is making Goodell look like a bit of a hypocrite and putting all these smudges on the shield, so to speak. And so from that standpoint, I mean, he just has no problem black-eyeing the NFL on this stuff over and over again, which I think is ultimately where the long-term damage lies.
I think you nailed it, 2 shows ago when you were, I kind of poo-pooed it at the time, but I think all of this is just Jerry Jones throwing a temper tantrum over the fact that his team lost his star running back, their star running back. And, it's like him acting like a 5-year-old. I don't know if he really wants to smear the shield, so to speak, more so than he's just mad. And that's really all that this comes down to, is that he's just mad. And I think he needs to get over himself. The Goodell contract sounds like a lot. $40 million a year. It's, more money than everybody sort of, Donald Trump is ever going to see in his life. But that's the going rate for a commissioner. He needs to get over himself and just get it done, because this is not helping the shield in the eyes of the public. We have the anthem protest problems. We've got CTE problems. All sorts of problems, and owner infighting is not helping things, and they need to get over it and move on, because nobody's going to care about Roger Goodell's contract a year from now. 0 people will care about it ever.
I do not understand, and we talked about this on the last show, how the NFL is in such of a crisis just from a public perception standpoint. And there aren't more owners coming out against Roger Goodell. And I've heard some of the logic in that it's, there's no one in the wings. It's, well, who else would you get? You can't tell me that you can't find another commissioner to run the NFL. And I hate to say this, but I was kind of with Jerry Jones in his ruckus that he caused, and that he, for a minute, with over Roger Goodell. But I think, and we don't have to get too much into it, I think he needs to go. But he's made the NFL owners money, and I've just accepted the fact that it's all about money and nothing else.
Of course it is. I mean, it's that's all it's ever been about, and this is akin to like a CEO of a major publicly traded corporation who is hired by the board of directors. That's what this is. And as long as the finances are right, that's all that really matters. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if the fans like him. Roger Goodell can be disliked for $40 million a year. Mm-hmm. That's just the price he pays. And frankly, I don't understand why. I never have understood why the fans dislike the guy so much, outside of New England with the Brady thing and maybe Dallas with the Elliott thing. Mm-hmm. I don't understand the hate. I don't really care about him one way or another. That's my position. Yeah. I really couldn't care less about Roger Goodell, dislike otherwise. I don't get the hatred of him.
I also think that it's, and this is something that I've talked to other people about. A lot of times people just hate the boss. I mean, you understand what I'm saying? Like I think people overly criticize the boss or the head of the owner and the boss and the head of any organization. I just think that people overly criticize, bosses and leaders.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're exactly right. It's, people aren't happy for whatever reason, and they're going to criticize the boss. And Roger Goodell's the face of the NFL in some respects, and so they hate him.
Right.
I think that's exactly. I don't think it's rational. It's human nature.
I think there's a good case against Roger Goodell if you wanted to make it. We made it in the past. You could debate that. I actually think that is actually on the side of this. And, in fact, you could probably make a case that Jerry Jones has solidified Goodell's in the league owners and in public perception with how ridiculous his temper tantrum is here. He's probably actually helped to secure Goodell's positive, his Q rating, so to speak, in both with the public and with those fellow owners. So it probably ends up backfiring. The one thing I'll say in defense of Jerry Jones is he was pretty right about the football implications of the Ezekiel Elliott suspension. So you could see maybe why he was so mad, because they have been a shell of a team since he actually had to start to serve a suspension. Now, smart money would have been take your losses in the first 6 games when the league is topsy-turvy anyway, and you could have probably gone 3-3 and then been fine coming out of it. But that's a different discussion. But it is funny that like you can sort of see, I think it's ridiculous, but you can sort of see why he was so mad, knowing his team.
Well, yeah, and if I recall, somebody named Steve Thomas on a certain show called It's Just Business told you guys in the beginning that the Elliott lawsuit was going to go nowhere and it was only going to end bad. And, of course, it did. And if I knew that, they should have known it, too. And so you're absolutely right. They should have just taken lumps and, that's it.
Yeah.
Taking their lumps in the beginning, and that's it. So, but we've beat a dead horse long enough.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm sure we'll get more attempts to beat it in the future, because I think the bad antics of Jerry Jones will not quiet down anytime soon, especially if they keep. Now, of course, we say this, and as Skins fans, we'll get our comeuppance on Thursday night for being all superior now.
Shut your mouth, boy.
Well, I'm not the one. I have to raise this on air, so to speak. Listening to the post-New Orleans Saints game one, I was outraged along with you, Steve, that one of your Hogsty cohorts was having victory. What are we going to do with this victory? Third quarter victory celebrations. That nothing makes me angrier than that.
I could. You're talking about Alex, and I justifiably criticize Alex for talking about game balls at halftime, and I blame him for the loss. And I still blame him for that loss.
I sign it. I am co-signed. I'm on your side. That nothing drives me crazier than that kind of mentality. Wait till the final gun, for the love of Pete.
And then they also poo-pooed the idea that Drew Brees, who is a Hall of Fame quarterback, did well and brought his team back, and they just poo-pooed me on that too. So those guys I'm on the outs with those guys.
Yeah, that angered me as well. I'm like, how can you? That was completely Drew Brees. There was no other way to slice that pie.
I can't discuss this. It's just sick. It's too painful. So maybe I'll mute this and then call me back when you guys want to move on. I can't talk about the Saints loss.
No, I sat there and stared at my computer screen for 15 minutes, and I don't know if I even blinked after that game was over. All right, well,
please blink. It's not good for your eyes. Please blink.
Yeah, right. All right, well, that's probably a good out for us as well. So join us in 2 weeks as we return for the next episode of It's Just Business. We will probably have lots of news stories, hopefully hopefully less Jerry Jones, and maybe even a less NFL being idiotic, and maybe we can talk about maybe even a positive NFL story, and other stories in general. So again, have a good kickoff to your holiday season. Anything you're looking forward to, Rich?
Yeah, to the actual Christmas holidays of working in the school system. So we've got about 3 weeks until the Christmas break, so it's going to be a mad dash. So I'm looking forward to the holiday season.
Steve, what about you?
I'm just excited about the work week beginning after the break. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm not looking forward to that at all. No, just, from a sports perspective, would like to see the Redskins rattle off a few wins. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Yes, I think we can all agree on that one, and I'm looking forward to the NFL playoff push and the championship run in general, and also seeing if my Washington Capitals can get their head out of their tuchus enough for a late season second half run. But we will see. So we will see you in a couple weeks. Stay tuned for All 32 and the Hogsty as they post episodes in between our next one, and be paying attention to the Hogsty Network.
All right. See you guys.